What if the one thing a man spent his whole life avoiding was the very thing that could save him? The sun sank low over the jagged peaks of the Bitterroot Mountains in Montana Territory, 1872, throwing long shadows across the land as Finnegan Young rode along the narrow trail. The cold wind cut through his coat and whistled through the tall pines, warning of an early winter. Finn's horse, a dappled gray named Shadow, stepped carefully along the rocky path. Finn was only 25, but life had carved deep lines into him. He had lost his parents to sickness at 14. His brother died 2 years later in a raid. By 16, he was riding long cattle drives. Now he worked as a hired gun for the Northern Pacific Railroad survey teams. His revolver hung at his side, always ready. Violence was the one thing he understood. He was tall, broad-shouldered, and moved with the easy confidence of a man who had spent years surviving danger. His sandy hair curled under the brim of his hat. His clear blue eyes had once been warm, but now they held a coldness he didn't bother hiding. "No point in getting attached," Finn said as he guided Shadow toward the valley below. "Not to anything, not to anyone." He believed that with his whole heart. The frontier took everything from you sooner or later. Better to stay alone, better to stay hard. But that belief began to crack the moment he saw smoke rising from a place that wasn't supposed to be lived in. The map said the valley was empty, untouched. But someone was here. Finn rode closer, cautious but curious. A neat log cabin stood near the tree line, its walls well built and its roof freshly repaired. A small corral held 2 horses. A vegetable garden sat near the back. Then he noticed something that surprised him more than anything else. A bright quilt hung on a clothesline, full of reds and yellows that danced in the wind. Before he could call out, the cabin door swung open. "If you're aiming to use that gun," a clear female voice called, "I'd appreciate it if you waited until I finish hanging these linens. Laundry is hard enough without bloodstains." Finn blinked in surprise. A young woman stepped out of the cabin with a basket on her hip. She looked about 22, with chestnut hair that fell in soft waves over her shoulders. She wore a simple blue dress, clean and pressed. There was nothing rough about her, nothing that belonged to a hard frontier life. But she stood there steady, unafraid of the armed cowboy sitting on a horse in front of her. "Ma'am," Finn said, touching the brim of his hat. "Didn't expect to find settlers this far out." "Julia Green," she said, setting down her basket. Her hazel eyes met his with sharp intelligence. "And this is Green Valley, my home." "You're here alone?" Finn asked before he could stop himself. She lifted her chin. "I survived last winter on my own. I can manage just fine." Finn wasn't sure whether she was brave or foolish. Maybe both. "Miss Green," he began, "you should know." A gunshot cracked suddenly through the valley. Birds burst from the trees. Julia dropped to the ground as Finn swung down from his saddle, rifle in hand. "Inside," Finn ordered, placing himself between her and the trees. "Now," quote. 3 riders thundered from the forest, heading straight for the cabin. "Those are Harlow's men," Julia whispered. Her face had gone pale, but her voice stayed steady. "They've been trying to force me off this land." Finn recognized the leader, a hired gun known across the territory. Dangerous, ruthless, exactly the kind of man Julia couldn't fight alone. "Go inside," Finn said again. But instead of running, Julia pulled a small derringer from her apron and stood beside him. "This is my home," she said. "I don't run." For the first time in years, Finn felt something shift inside him. This woman, alone in the mountains, facing down armed men without fear, made something stir in him he didn't understand. The riders slowed as they got close, recognizing Finn. His reputation was well known. After a tense exchange, Harlow's men turned back with a warning that they would return. Once they were gone, Julia let out a breath and looked at Finn. "Well," she said calmly, "I suppose I owe you a cup of coffee." Quote. Inside her cabin, Finn was struck by the warmth she had created in a place so wild. Shelves held books. A quilt lay across a small bed. Herbs hung from the rafters. It felt like a real home, not a temporary shelter. Over strong coffee, Julia told her story. Her father had brought her west after her mother died. They built the cabin together. After her father passed, she claimed the land officially. But a man named Harlow wanted the valley for himself. He began threatening her, believing a woman had no right to own such rich land. "Why stay?" Finn asked. "There are safer places." Julia looked toward the window. The mountains glowed gold in the fading light. "Because this land matters. Because this is where my father built a future for us. Because running would mean letting the worst kind of men decide who belongs here." Finn didn't know what to say. Her words challenged everything he believed. He left that evening, but he didn't leave lighthearted. Something about Julia, her strength, her stubborn hope, stayed with him as he rode away. And by the time he reached the survey camp, he already knew he would return. Because for the first time in a long time, Finnegan Young had found something he didn't want to lose. What do you do when the one person you meant to protect ends up becoming the one person you can't live without? Over the next few weeks, Finn returned to Green Valley again and again. At first, he told himself he was only checking on Julia because of Harlow's men. That was his job. That was the right thing to do. But each time he rode into the valley and saw Julia working in her garden or hanging laundry on the line, he knew there was more to it. Finn helped her mend the corral fence and split firewood for the winter. Julia insisted on cooking him supper in return. They spent long evenings talking by the fire. She read from her father's books, her voice soft and warm. Finn carved wooden figures, surprised at how natural the memory felt. He had not allowed himself to do anything gentle in years. "Look at this place," Julia said one evening as they sat on the porch. The valley glowed gold beneath the sunset. "Is this not worth fighting for? Worth loving?" Finn didn't answer. He didn't know how. But in his chest, something cracked, then opened. She had no idea how close she was to the truth. Winter came early. Heavy snow coated the valley and cut them off from town. Finn built a small cabin only a short ride from Julia's. But most nights he ended up at her place, boots by the fire, rifle leaning against the wall, listening to her read while the storm raged outside. "Maybe we survive better together," Julia said one night as the fire crackled in the hearth. Finn looked at her, really looked at her. He had spent his whole life running from connection. But here she was, offering something he never knew he needed. He wanted to tell her he felt the same, but fear held his tongue. Love could be taken away. Love could destroy you. Spring thawed the snow, but it did not bring peace. Harlow's men returned. They tore up Julia's garden. They poisoned the well. They left warnings carved into her cabin door. Finn grew more protective, angrier each time he saw her frightened face. Then, one afternoon, as Finn and Julia rode back from checking the fences, a man in an expensive suit waited in front of the cabin. "Miss Julia Green," he said, straightening his coat. "Harold Whitmore. I represent the Northern Pacific Railroad." Julia's jaw tightened. "The land is not for sale." Whitmore smiled in a way that meant danger. "The railroad has been granted right-of-way. We intend to build a station here. Your presence complicates matters." "Show me the papers that say you have a right to this land," Julia said firmly. "Until then, you are the one trespassing." Whitmore's eyes narrowed. "This valley will not remain yours much longer." After he left, Finn paced inside the cabin. "You should sell, Julia. Take the money. Start somewhere safe." She stared at him as though he'd struck her. "Is that what you believe? That we should run because someone powerful tells us to?" "I believe in surviving," Finn said, anger rising. "I can't watch you die for a piece of land." Julia stepped closer, her eyes soft but strong. "Finn, is that what you fear? That caring for someone means losing them?" Quote. Her hand brushed his cheek gently. "You've lost so much that you stopped allowing yourself to want anything that could be taken away. But that's not living, Finn. That's just avoiding pain." Her words hit him harder than any bullet ever had. That night, as a storm shook the mountains, everything between them changed. They kissed with years of loneliness behind them. Finn's walls fell, broken by the one person strong enough to break them. In her arms, he felt something he had never felt before. A reason to stay. A reason to fight. A reason to live. But the valley was not done testing them. Barely a week later, Finn returned from a supply run to find Julia's cabin burning. Flames roared toward the sky. Her horse was gone. The door hung open. Finn's heart stopped as he searched the smoking ruins. A note was nailed to a tree. "The woman is with us. Trade the deed for her life. Harlow." For a long moment, Finn couldn't breathe. His greatest fear had come true. Caring for someone had opened a wound deeper than he had ever known. But even as pain tore through him, another truth rose stronger. Having her in his life had been worth every risk, and now he would prove it. Finn tracked Harlow's men into the mountains, following broken branches, hoof prints, and scraps of cloth caught on brush. Hours passed. Darkness fell. Cold bit into his skin. But he didn't stop. He couldn't. When he finally reached the abandoned mining camp, he spotted 6 men. Lantern light glowed from the shack where they kept Julia tied inside. Finn studied the camp, planning his move. He moved silently through the shadows, taking down 2 guards without a sound. He was steps from the shack when a shout rang out. "Someone's here!" Gunfire exploded in the night. Finn dove behind a boulder, returning fire. Bullets sparked against rock. Julia's voice rose from inside the shack, steady and strong. "Finn, left side! 2 men!" Even bound, she was fighting. Even scared, she was helping him survive. Finn pushed forward through the gunfire. A bullet grazed his arm, but he kept going. He kicked open the shack door. Julia was already halfway free, ropes loose around her hands. "Took you long enough," she said with a brave smile despite the bruise on her cheek. "I had to make sure you missed me," Finn answered, cutting the last rope. Before they could escape, Harlow stepped from the shadows, rifle raised. "You always did have more heart than sense, Young," Harlow said. "Should have stayed out of this." Finn stood in front of Julia, shielding her with his body. "And you always thought fear was stronger than love," Finn said. "You were wrong." The standoff was short, but fierce. Harlow fell wounded, his men scattered. Finn and Julia raced into the dark mountains and didn't stop until dawn. At a ranger station, the territorial marshal listened to their story and immediately issued warrants for Harlow and his crew. But trouble followed fast. A message arrived for Julia. Whitmore had filed legal claims. He said her homestead was invalid because she had no husband. Her land was in danger again. Julia's voice trembled when she read the letter. "Finn, everything my father built, everything we fought for." Finn looked at her, really looked at her. He had almost lost her once. He would not lose her again. "Julia," he said, dropping to one knee, "marry me." Her eyes widened. "Finn, not like this, not because of the land." "I'm asking because I love you," he said softly. "Because the day I met you, my whole world changed. Because I want a life with you, land or no land." Tears filled her eyes. Yes. 3 days later, they stood in the ranger station exchanging vows. It wasn't fancy, but it was real. And for the first time in his life, Finn felt whole. The fight for the valley was far from over. The railroad lawyers were relentless. But Finn stood beside Julia in every hearing. When a senator visited the valley and saw the truth for himself, everything changed. By fall, the court ruled in their favor. Julia kept her home. They kept their valley. Together. What happens when a man who never believed in love suddenly finds himself building a whole future around it? As autumn spread across the Bitterroot Mountains, Finn and Julia rode back into Green Valley after winning their case. The air felt different now, lighter, safer. Their valley, their home, was finally protected. Julia leaned against Finn as they rode. Her smile was soft, full of quiet relief. "We'll need to rebuild everything," she said. "The cabin, the garden, the fencing, all of it." Finn looked at her with a warmth he never thought he would feel in his life. "We'll build something better," he said. "Stronger, bigger, something that lasts." And for the first time he truly believed it. They spent the winter rebuilding from the ashes. Finn cut new timber from the mountain slopes, hauling each log himself. Julia planted new seeds, even though the cold still hung in the soil. Together they hammered nails, carried stones, cooked meals, and worked side by side until the valley once again felt alive. By spring, a new cabin stood tall. Not the small, lonely one Julia had lived in before, but a warm, two-story home with a wide porch and real glass windows. Finn built the furniture by hand. Julia filled the shelves with books. Every room held something made with love. One morning, as the river thawed and the first flowers bloomed along the valley floor, Julia took Finn's hand. "There's something I need to tell you," she said, her voice trembling with joy. Finn felt his heart stop. "Julia, what is it?" Quote. She looked up at him, eyes shining. "I'm carrying our child." For a moment he couldn't speak. The man who once believed he needed no one felt his whole world shift into something bigger than he had ever dared to imagine. A family, a future, a life he once believed was impossible. Finn pulled Julia into his arms and held her as though the world depended on it. "I'll take care of you," he whispered, "both of you. Always." Summer arrived bright and warm. The valley continued to grow. The railroad track passed along the far edge, but instead of destroying the peaceful land, it brought opportunity. Travelers stopped at the station and bought vegetables from Julia, furniture from Finn, herbs, quilts, or anything the valley produced. Green Valley was no longer just a homestead. It was becoming a small, thriving community. The same marshal who had helped them months earlier stopped by often. "You two are building something rare out here," he said once as he rode away. "Most folks come to the frontier to take. You two came to build." As the months passed, Julia's belly grew. Finn worked harder than ever, making sure their home was safe and warm, chopping wood, repairing fences, tending their horses. But he also slowed down in ways he never had before. When Julia read on the porch, he sat next to her. When she walked the garden, he walked with her. When she laughed, he found himself laughing too. He no longer feared losing her. He feared only wasting a single moment of the life they were building. One evening, as the sun painted the sky pink and gold, Julia stood on the porch, her hands resting gently on her round belly. Finn stepped outside and wrapped his arms around her from behind. "Do you ever think about the day we met?" she asked. "All the time," Finn said softly. "I thought you were trouble." Quote, "I was hanging laundry," she teased, and pointing a gun at strangers. He reminded her. She laughed, leaning into him. "Maybe I saved you that day." "You did," Finn said simply. "You saved me from a life I didn't know was empty." Julia turned, resting her head against his chest as the mountains glowed in the fading light. "We're going to raise a family here," she whispered. "In this valley my father loved, in a home we built together." Finn kissed the top of her head. "And nothing will ever take it from us." When winter came again, Julia went into labor on a stormy night as snow swept across the mountains. Finn stayed by her side, holding her hand, whispering soft words, refusing to leave for even a second. Just before dawn, their son was born. Julia placed the small, warm child in Finn's arms, her eyes filled with tears. "Welcome to the world, little one," Finn whispered, overwhelmed by a love so powerful it almost brought him to his knees. The boy had his mother's soft cheeks and Finn's clear blue eyes. They named him Daniel Young, after Julia's father. The moment Finn held his son, he knew something with absolute certainty. He had once believed love made a man weak, but standing there, holding the two people he loved most in the world, he understood the truth he had spent years running from. Love had made him stronger. Love had given him a home. Love had given him a family. And in the heart of a valley he once meant only to pass through, Finnegan Young discovered the one thing every rough cowboy secretly hopes to find: a life worth fighting for, a place to belong, and a love that would last longer than the mountains themselves.